Sochi, Kushina said and furled the scroll before turning around. Come on Makoto. It's time for us to open the main house and we'll tidy the place up. Something tells me that we're in for a long time of questions and answers, Kushina said and Makoto nodded as they walked off. A little later, Naruto and the others. Alright, we'll see you later Tsunami-san. Thanks for the breakfast, Naruto said making Tsunami nod as she waved goodbye to Naruto and his friends. They all waved goodbye and walked away from the house while Yuri wrapped her arms around Naruto's arms. Yuri, don't bother Ni-sama so much, Yura scolded and Yuri responded with a stick of her tongue at her sister. No way Oni-chan. I'm going to hang around the brother that I've always wanted, Yuri said pushing her rather medium assets on Naruto's hand making the blonde blush while Sasuke snorted. Haku and Zabuza sighed while Yura grew a tick mark on her head. Why you ungrateful little, she said and Yuri snickered while taking Yura's hand. Ah, I love you too Oni-chan. Don't be mad, she said and Naruto chuckled while Yura sighed and merely nodded her head at her little sister as they all came to a small boat. The entire coast wasn't clean of people and someone allowed them to go and take his boat, to which Naruto expressed his gratitude. So Naruto-san, what type of place is Uzugakure? Haku asked while Naruto and Zabuza raised the sails. Yura and Yuri unloaded the things and Sasuke released the anchor. It's not bad Haku-chan. Honestly it is still being rebuilt, but I'd like to say that when it's done it will be a lot better than it looks right now. You'll see in a few hours, Naruto told her and Haku nodded her head while they all sailed off. 3 or 4 hours later. Naruto was sleeping and on his lap was Yuri while they were all waiting. Zabuza was steering the ship as were Naruto's instructions. Haku seemed to be talking with Yura while Sasuke opened a scroll and looked it over from his mother's Kenjutsu. She had called it Uchiha no Hanran, Uchiha Rebellion Kenjutsu. Sasuke had asked her about the name and Makoto had spoken that it was about Uchiha rising above what most expected of them. She seemed to think that the name fitted most of the clan who were treated unfairly by the rest for their inability to produce a good Sharingan. Makoto had gained hers, but she still did it anyway. Oi Haku, wake up the Gaki. I see the whirlpools, Zabuza said and Haku nodded as she motioned for Naruto. The blonde groaned and opened a tired eye while Haku smiled. We're waiting for you Naruto-san, Haku said and the blonde turned to see the ravaging swirls of water and jumped to his feet. He quickly bit his thumb and traced the blood over a piece of paper drawing a seal while Yuri opened her eyes. She leaned up to see Naruto writing on the paper and allowed the blonde to get up and head to the front of the ship. He quickly jumped on the water and slammed it with the seal. Uzu no Fuin. Shotatsu, whirlpool seal. Collision, Naruto yelled like his mother and the water collided breaking apart the swirls of water allowing them to pass while Naruto urged Zabuza to move. Hurry, this isn't going to hold for long, Naruto told him and Zabuza nodded as he turned the steer and moved the ship. Naruto hopped back on and rested on the ship. It wasn't long before they all hit the island and Naruto jumped off. Yura gazed at the island and gasped. So this is our home huh? She asked as she jumped down also and Yuri followed landing in Naruto's arms while the blonde placed her down. Haku, Sasuke and Zabuza dropped also as Naruto guided everyone through the forest. Yura and Yuri gasped left and right at the sounds of animals and the lush forest with the setting sun. Zabuza and Haku looked around staring and found the dense forest a little comforting, but they didn't know why. Yuri, welcome home, Naruto said to the village gates as they peered inside. Yura heard the various sounds of people working and construction rained in the streets. The buildings looked so amazing to her and Yuri. Wow, Ni-san this is amazing, Yuri said and Naruto chuckled with a nod before they saw 2 figures in the distance. Naruto narrowed his eyes into a smile while the 2 female beings came into view. Welcome back so soon Sochi, Kushina said and Naruto rubbed the back of his head with a nod while Makoto greeted Sasuke. Hey Ka-chan, sorry for coming back so early. Sasuke and I needed some things and had to come back. We still managed to secure some money if you want to know. Also have a look at these 2, Naruto said and Kushina turned to Yura and Yuri. The 2 glazed at the female Uzumaki matriarch, if that's how it was, before Naruto patted Kushina's shoulders. Ka-chan, they are Uzumaki. Just like you and me, Naruto told her making Kushina widen her eyes. She stared at Yura and Yuri like they were her own children. Yura smiled and Yuri waved. Nice to meet you Kushina Uzumaki. I'm Yura Uzumaki and this is my sister Yuri Uzumaki, Yura spoke and Kushina nodded fast before she turned to them. Who are your parents? She asked eagerly, and Yura raised an eyebrow before answering. They were Toru Uzumaki and Kira Fukun. Yura spoke and Kushina smiled as she grabbed Yura and Yuri into a fierce hug. One of my best friends. Toru Uzumaki, my cousin, Kushina said with a few tears while Yura and Yuri returned the hug. Everyone smiled at the moment before Kushina and the two girls separated while Kushina stood to her feet. How Sochi? How did you find them? Kushina asked, and before long the smile on Naruto and Yura's face faded into a glare and frown. Kushina seemed confused while Naruto spoke about how he even managed to find the two of his relatives, and needless to say, but Kushina wasn't pleased. Not in the least. I see, she said, trying to hide the growing frustration in her eyes, but she calmed when Naruto gave her a thumbs up that he had ended the deal, and seeing Yura along with Yuri smile. It was thanks to Nisama that we could meet you. We hold no regrets, Yura said, and Yuri grabbed Naruto's hand. He really helped us out. Don't be mad, Kushina-san, Yuri spoke, and Kushina nodded her head before turning to see Haku and Zabuza. The only reason she knew it was them was because of Naruto's description of them that he told her back in Wave. Haku and Zabuza, I presume? She asked while Makoto stared at the two nin. Haku bowed and Zabuza merely huffed a bit of annoyance. What of it? Zabuza asked before he received a nudge in his gut from his daughter. Haku merely smiled more and shook Kushina's hand while Naruto looked around. Where are Kakashi and Yugao-san? The blonde asked, and it was Makoto's turn to speak. They went to earn some money for the construction with the bingo book. Who knows when they will be back, Makoto said, and Naruto sighed with a nod as he turned to Kushina. Ka-san, I'll explain everything when Kakashi and Yugao arrive. I promise, but mind Sasuke and I unpacking? Naruto asked, and Kushina nodded, sending the two away to get settled inside while she turned back to Yura and Yuri. Alright, you two will be coming with me. Makoto, for now, set Haku-san and Zabuza up in one of the houses. We'll wait for Sochi's explanation and then we'll all decide what to do with them. Kushina spoke and Makoto nodded as Haku and Zabuza followed her and Sasuke to the other houses that were finished, for the most part. Back in Konoha, Hyuga compound. Hiashi was currently bowing to Hizashi for all it was worth while they were alone. He still felt all the guilt from the past rushing back to him from the Kumo while Hizashi sighed. Brother, I said it was fine, Hizashi said with a rare smile, and Hiashi grabbed his shoulders. I still can't help but feel guilty. You shouldn't have had to die for something that I had done. Because of me, Neji became like he was when he was younger. I'm sorry, Hiashi said, and Hizashi closed his eyes and folded his arms. He's grown into an astounding young man. I'm glad, and we both have Naruto Uzumaki to thank for that, Hizashi said while Hiashi slightly widened his eyes and moved back to a more formal sitting position. Yes, Naruto-san has done so much for me that I can never repay except with my silence until he announces his ownership of the Shinigami contract. Because of him I have Hanako and Neji has you, Hiashi said, making Hizashi nod. He looked out the window to see Hanako teaching Hinata and Hanabi a few Juyuken stances that weren't put into the scrolls before her death. He smiled at the sight before looking to see Neji with his arms folded waiting for his father to spar with him in turn. Hizashi sighed and stood to his feet. I'm very grateful to Naruto-san. He's done more for this clan than even the Hokage has. I've guaranteed my word of silence as well. I can't understand his position, but I know why he feels anxious. Imagine so many people's surprise when the blonde holds the power to revive the dead. They would overwhelm him with admiration, recognition, but also grief and regrets about their loved ones. I'm sure he doesn't want anyone to try and take advantage of his kindness. Imagine if he also refuses them, it would cause a massive riot. His burden is very heavy. More than it was before, Hizashi said, and Hiashi knew full well what his brother was talking about since he spoke with Naruto as well. It wasn't just that. If world like this moved to the other nations, then it would be chaos. Naruto-san, remain strong, as I fear that sometime you will need more help than you realize, Hiashi said in his thoughts. With Sakura. The pink-haired Kunoichi sighed as she finished a mission with her teammates Sai and Yamato. It just wasn't the same as being with Naruto. He could make her laugh, and Sai was always taking about people's privates, but it was funny when it was done to other people. She still had yet to see Naruto, Sasuke or Kakashi. The loss of those three was rather extreme. Naruto, Sasuke-kun, what are you guys doing right now? Sakura asked herself while looking up at the sky before she parted from Sai and Yamato. They had tried to find a lead on something about a moving castle, but saw nothing of the sort. As if something like that would exist. Yeah right, Sakura said with a chuckle and walked to attend to the medical facilities. Sakura walked inside and sighed while she noticed Ino with a notepad. What's up, forehead? Ino asked, and Sakura merely shrugged. Not seeing Naruto's goofy smile or Sasuke at all is rather boring. I'm just tired, Sakura said, and Ino sighed as she patted Sakura's back. Come on, Sakura, they're fulfilling their dreams. Naruto brought Sasuke back just like he promised. Granted, he's still an ass at times, but he's never looked happier. At least from the last time I saw him. You'll see them again, I'm sure. Someone has to keep those two in line, Ino said, trying to lift Sakura's spirits, and the pink-haired Kunoichi merely smiled with a nod as she straightened up. You're right, Ino. I've got to do what I can and get back to work. Thanks, she said, and Ino huffed and walked away. Whatever, forehead. Just stop brooding, Ino said, and Sakura laughed as she went to go and get some things done. With Tsunade, the Godime Hokage was currently rummaging through the mission room looking for any sign of missions that would be given to either Hanako or Makoto, but she saw nothing. She knew that some missions weren't catalogued because of the importance, but could something be so important that Sarutobi had to say that Hanako and Makoto died for them to complete their mission? Then there was Hizashi. He just suddenly appeared and said that Makoto could vouch for him. None of it was making sense. All these people that Sarutobi said had died were just coming back, and the village was starting to think that it was having so many blessings from the shinigami that this was insane to believe. People even started hoping that their loved ones would come back. It was staggering to Tsunade, and she hoped that Makoto would be able to shed any type of light on the situation. Where is it? Where is it? She wondered, looking through a cabinet before an Anbu opened the door. Tsunade-sama, I have delivered the message to Kakashi and Yugao. They will make sure to hand it to Makoto-sama and everyone will return back. Will that be all? The Anbu asked, and Tsunade glared at him, making him gulp. It wasn't his fault. She was having a breakdown from no sake, but if she drank any more then more shit would be a headache, and she didn't want that. Yes, that will be all. Good work, Tsunade said, and the Anbu quickly left the room while Tsunade sighed. This is just great. Bore, get your ass in here. Tsunade yelled, and another Anbu came under her tone. Yes, Tsunade-sama? He asked, and Tsunade turned around before glaring at him. Have you found Danzo at all? She asked, and Bore shook his head. No, Tsunade-sama, but we're working on it. The village wonders about his disappearance, but no one is really asking questions. Isn't this Hinoken's assignment? He asked, and Tsunade continued to rummage through the files. It was, but I took them off for a bit. Having them grow as a team will more than make up for that in the long run. Now then, summon the damn council. I need to speak with them, Tsunade said, and Bore sunshined out of the room while Tsunade dropped to the ground before she heard struggling. She turned around to see Konohamaru walking while Moegi and Udon were grabbing him, trying to hold him back. Hey old lady, where is Nisan? He's been gone for days. He said he's teach me a cool jutsu, Konohamaru said, and Tsunade growled at the disrespect, but seeing Naruto in Konohamaru she settled down. Ah, sorry Tsunade-sama. We tried to stop him, but Moegi replied, and the blonde Hokage groaned. She walked up to Konohamaru and glared at him. Oh, and what are you going to do if I don't tell you? She asked, and Konohamaru growled. I'll tell the council that you used some of the funds to pay off your debts, he said before Tsunade bopped him on the head. You wish, brat, but Naruto isn't in the village. He'll be here in 2 or 3 days since I sent a letter for him and his team back here. So calm down, got it? She asked, and Konohamaru's mood instantly changed as he ran back with Udon and Moegi following him. Damn eager brat, Tsunade said before she walked off, seeing as how Konohamaru made her lose her train of thought for the moment. Somewhere in the middle of off at Akatsuki base. The 9 members of Akatsuki came together and formed around the Nibi Jinchuriki. They were busy sealing away her chakra along with the life force of her body. Her name was Yugito-ni, and she was rapidly dying. Itachi, Kisame, what is the word on the Kyubi Jinchuriki? Pain asked while everyone continued. We have no information on his whereabouts currently. We will continue to track him when we can, Itachi said, and Kisame snickered. That brat won't get away from us again, Kisame said, and Hidan sighed. Yeah right. I beat Kakuzu and I could take care of him faster than any of you, he spoke, and Kisame grew a tick mark on his head while turning around. Oh yeah. Then do it. I don't really give a flying fuck about it, you cultist. What do you say, Itachi? Kisame asked, and Itachi closed his eyes. I don't really care. Do what you want, Itachi said, and Kakazu smirked. I intend to. You don't have to worry about that, he said, and everyone looked to Pain for acknowledgement, and he merely nodded his head and allowed Hidan and Kakazu to do what they wanted. Where was he last spotted? Hidan asked, and Kisame snickered. Figure it out, asshole, he said, and Hidan growled while Deidara sighed. Oh, shut up already, he said while Toby laughed. Oh boy, Senpai is pissed, but Toby didn't do it. Toby knows when to be serious, the masked Akatsuki member said, and Deidara growled. Then be serious now, he said while Toby sighed. It matters not. Hidan and Kakuzu will go after the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Go to Konoha if you need a lead, but be careful and don't mess up. Now let's finish this up, Pain said, and everyone agreed as they extracted the Nibi from Yugito-ni, but the Nibi Jinchuriki didn't know that she would get her turn at them again. She definitely would, as would the other Jinchuriki taken by Akatsuki. Somewhere near Hino Kuni's fire temple. 4 members were currently hiding away from the trees while one of them, obviously female, rubbed the base of her leg. The small seal that had appeared on her those weeks ago was still a bit antagonizing. She sighed and brushed her hair while she leaned against a tree. You alright? Fuin asked her, and Fuka merely smiled and nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. Just wondered about that pain that hit me a while ago, she said, and Fuin merely nodded absently while Fudo chuckled as he looked at her pain. Maybe the last person you took had AIDS. Do you think? Fudo asked, and Fuka glared at him hard before she kicked him into a tree. No, I think I'm fine enough. Besides, you should watch your mouth around a lady, she said, and Fudo merely rolled his eyes before they all saw a man come out of the shadows. HMPH, don't worry about that. Now is everything ready? He asked, and everyone bowed with nods. You got it, Furito, Fudo said, and Furito nodded his head. Good, then what is our goal? He asked, and they all smirked. Overthrow Konoha and the Hokage, they said, and Furito nodded his head fast as they all went into action. Nighttime, Uzushiogakure. Naruto, Yura and Yuri were sitting with the others having their dinner before they all heard a knock on the door. Kushina raised an eyebrow and yelled. It's open, she said, and the door slid open to reveal Kakashi and Yugao. The two came in, and Kakashi gave an eye smile. We're back, he paused and narrowed his eyes only to go into shock when he saw Zabuza at the table. Kakashi quickly grabbed his father's sword and charged at the mist nin. Zabuza watched him come before Naruto jumped up and grabbed Kakashi's hand at the hilt of his sword before he completely drew it. Kakashi narrowed his eye at Naruto, and the blonde's glare told him to ease off the sword. Kakashi did so, and Naruto removed his hand while Kushina stood to her feet. Kakashi, no fighting during dinner. Sochi said he would explain everything, so sit with us, Kushina said, and Kakashi narrowed his eye while Yugao followed, not seeing the big deal, but for Kakashi it was bigger than it should have been. Dinner was rather tense as everyone was eating slowly. It had to end sometime though, so everyone was finished and Naruto asked for them to gather around the room. Yura and Yuri decided to leave them alone, but Naruto told them to stay since he could trust them and they were family. It took a bit of time, but everyone sat down and waited for Naruto to gather his thoughts. See, you're lucky. You don't have to deal with this, Naruto said, and Kyuubi cackled while his tails thrashed around the entire room of the mindscape. Say what you want, but you're telling this story and make it good. This popcorn won't do well by itself, Kyuubi said, and Naruto lightly grumbled before turning his attention back to everyone. The 3 couches that formed around the coffee table were all seated with Kushina, Makoto, Yura, Yuri, Sasuke, Haku, Zabuza, Kakashi and Yugao. Alright Sochi, we're all here, so what is it that you want to tell them? Kushina asked while she, Makoto and Sasuke knew what he was going to say. Same with Haku and Zabuza, but they let him talk while Naruto nodded. Alright, then. Ahem, Kakashi, Yugao-san, I'm sorry, but I've kept a secret from you both when I joined this team, Naruto told them, making Kakashi widen his eyes and Yugao do the same, but they let him talk. Yura and Yuri glanced at each other wondering how the blonde could lie, but didn't say anything. So Naruto unfastened the top half of his black shinobi shirt and placed it on the table. Then came the mesh armor he was wearing, making Yura and Yuri blush from the blonde's toned body. It was so fit from Kushina, training as it made them blush wildly. And Ni-san, Yuri said in her thoughts, and while Yura tried not to look interested, she still blushed at seeing such a fit body. And Ni-sama, she spoke, but upon closer inspection everyone gasped as they saw the black seal on Naruto's hand as two black lines went up his shoulder and went throughout his chest. The seal lines went down his sides and rested near his seal for the Kyuubi. Naruto, what is that? Yugao asked, never having seen such intricate sealing in her life. Kushina had a vague idea, but her being Naruto's valve of spiritual power, she had some of the same things on her body, not that she'd show it. Sasuke, Makoto and Kakashi activated their Sharingans and looked at Naruto's chakra. Tell me what you see, Naruto said, and Kakashi decided to speak. Something white. It's not chakra, but it's so clear. It's flowing from the seals throughout your body and into your chakra coils. Also it looks like your chakra is dying. Like it's being eliminated, Kakashi said, and Naruto nodded as he asked them to deactivate the Sharingans, to which all three did, and Naruto touched the seal on his hand. Kakashi, Yugao-san. On this hand, I hold a summoning contract with the Shinigami, Naruto said, and if seeing Zabuza alive shocked him, then Kakashi was blown away along with Yugao. Yura and Yuri widened their eyes to Naruto's words, finding them hard to believe. Makoto and Kushina glanced at each other while Sasuke remained quiet. Haku and Zabuza tried to gauge reactions before Yugao spoke. Naruto-san, I'm afraid that I can't believe something so outrageous without proof. I know that, and I'm going to begin, Naruto said, making Kakashi and Yugao pay attention. The blonde huffed and decided to begin. Kakashi, you remember back to when you found me unconscious at Final Valley? Naruto asked, and Kakashi nodded. He remembered racing through the forest with Naruto on his back while Sasuke showed bits of remorse, but Naruto continued. In all truth, Kakashi, I should have died before you made it back to Konoha, Naruto told him, and Kakashi widened his eyes, as did Sasuke. Shinigami came for my soul in that time. He tried to stab me with his sword, but I somehow dodged it. Shin was stumped as to how it happened, since it never happened. He told me it was time for me to die, but I yelled at him and told him that I'd die on my own terms and not before I accomplished my dream, Naruto said, making everyone gasp as they didn't know this. Who had the gall to be disrespectful to the Shinigami of all beings? Kushina lightly chuckled, as she would have been the same, and that laughter softened everyone, and Yuri wanted to ask something, but Yura told her to wait till Naruto was finished. Moving on, Shin and I traded barbs and words about my life. He said that everything dies eventually and it was my time, but I told him that I refused to die. I had too much to accomplish to die like that, and somehow he said that I was interesting. So he stabbed me with his sword, and instead of killing me like I thought he did, he poured his power into me and gave me this contract. I then passed out and ended up in the hospital, Naruto said, and everyone seemed to skeptical except the obvious people. Yura and Yuri seemed sad that Naruto was supposed to die, but they were confused as to the fact that he lived. I have found that I can summon him twice a day for anything that I want. He told me that being his summoner I could revive people. So long as I paid compensation, Naruto said, and Kakashi widened his eye before turning to Kushina and Makoto. Then that means that, Kushina and Makoto nodded, showing Kakashi and Yugao that they were in on it as well. Sasuke glared and Yura stood to her feet. You killed people. All for that. Naruto, you're horrible, Yura shouted while Yuri grabbed her hand. Let him finish, Oni-chan. He saved us, remember? Ni-san can't be bad. I just know it, Yuri said, and Yura looked at her little sister before sighing a nod and sat back down. Naruto thanked Yuri, making the red-haired girl smile with a nod while Blonde continued. I made a vow. Jiraiya had always told me that there could be peace in the world. I used this contract on that belief. I only kill those who have deserved it, Naruto said directly towards Yura, making her widen her eyes. Kakashi and Yugao narrowed their own. What do you mean, those who deserve it? Yugao asked, and Naruto sighed. Those who take away. Those who hold no remorse for what they do and love to end lives all for the sake of their own. It's people like these that I kill. I never kill an innocent, as I know I couldn't look any of the people I revive in the eye if I did. And Kakashi, to answer your question, then yes. This is how I revive Gaara and not have Chiyo-bachan waste her life, Naruto said, and Kakashi nodded in understanding while Yugao stood to her feet. That still doesn't explain why you lied to Hokage-sama. That is a serious offense worthy of execution, Naruto-san, Yugao said, and Naruto snorted slightly while looking at the ground. It wouldn't matter, Naruto said, and Yugao widened her eyes as did everyone else. Why not? She asked rather angrily that one of her teammates would want to die so easily without fear of the consequences, and Naruto sighed. I can't die, he said, breaking everyone's stare who was looking at him. Yugao widened her eyes in shock while Kakashi did the same. You said everything dies, then why do you say that? She asked, and Naruto rubbed the back of his head. My contract with Shin makes it so that he will never take my soul, and in essence he won't take my life. Also Yugao-san, I do realize my actions. I like Ba-chan a lot and lying to her really hurts, but I was trying to be smart about it, Naruto said, which confused everyone, even Zabuza and Haku who were listening. Yura and Yuri seemed confused as well while Kakashi spoke. What do you mean, Naruto? Kakashi asked, wondering about this change in behavior from Naruto while the blonde sighed for the umpteenth time. I mean that I thought about all the people I could help. I helped Hiyashi-san and Hinata with their mother, Hanako. I helped Neji with his father. I helped Sasuke with his mother and me with mine. I wanted to help so many people who lost their people, but I wondered about what would happen. People would ask me for revivals all the time and I would end up killing more and more, which I didn't want. I was afraid that if I didn't fulfill their request then I would be deemed a traitor to Konoha for not helping when I could, Naruto said, making everyone nod in agreement. They could see the logic in his actions while Yugao spoke again. Tsunade-sama could make it an S-class secret. No one would talk about it, Yugao said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes while he balled his fists. The Kyuubi was a SS-class secret. Me being its container was supposed to be a secret, but in less than a week the entire village knew about it and everyone hated me. How could I tell Ba-chan after something like that? Naruto asked, and Yugao held her head down in shame. She knew it also, along with Kakashi. Word had spread so fast around the village about Naruto that no one could control it. Of course Naruto would be cautious. Who the hell wouldn't? So I only let a few people know about it. Ka-chan knew, Makoto-san knew, Hiyashi-san, Hanako-san, Hazashi-san, and now I'm telling you all because I trust you, Naruto said, and Kushina tried to gauge everyone's reactions. Yuri seemed so amazed at Naruto for being so thoughtful about them to trust them this much, and Yura was looking regretful for her words. Sasuke looked calculative and Yugao the same. Kakashi looked lost in thought before Kushina stood to her feet. I wasn't happy with the news either. I didn't want Sochi to kill just for me, but I felt so thoughtful in a way. He is telling the truth. I was revived, Kushina said, making everyone slump. Here is my last ounce of proof, Naruto said, biting his thumb. He drew it over his seal. Yugao and Kakashi tensed, and so did Sasuke while Naruto yelled. Kuchio's no jutsu, Naruto yelled, and his seal glowed brightly, blinding everyone for a bit. The light faded and everyone waited for a few minutes while Naruto turned his head. Shin, reveal yourself. It's alright, Naruto said to him, and everyone watched as out of nowhere the shinigami came into view. His purple demon-like face, his white robes with the purple beads in one of his hands. His long purple arms and his steely gaze. Yugao widened her eyes to the truth while Kakashi seemed so shocked. Sasuke tried to remain impassive, but failed and lightly trembled under the ki. Strangely, Yuri came up to the spirit and smiled. He's so cute, Ni-san, she said, and Naruto's sweat dropped. Cute? The blonde asked, and hearing those words made people relax. They stared at him a little more freely and examined him. It was the honest-to-goodness Shinigami in all his deathness. Uzumaki Naruto, why have you summoned me? Shin asked, and the blonde turned around. I need people to trust, and the best thing to do was to tell them like this. Please don't be mad, Naruto said, and Shin folded his arms while Yuri tried to touch him, but her hand only went through him as she raised an eyebrow. Everyone gazed a little longer before Naruto allowed Shin to leave. The death god sighed and immediately left while Naruto bowed. Please believe me, Naruto said, and the room was quiet again. Everyone stayed to their thoughts for a few minutes before Yugao folded her arms. I can't say that I approve, Naruto-san, that you would keep it a secret from your team, but I can understand and I believe you. Thank you for trusting me, Yugao said, and Naruto smiled while Kakashi stood up and turned around. Well, sorry for the attack, Zabuza. Got a little startled, Kakashi said with an eye smile and rubbed the back of his head. Zabuza snorted and got to his feet. Like you could do anything, Kakashi. You'd better be lucky that the brat is my superior, one who's in charge of another, or I'd really kick your ass, Zabuza said while Kakashi held up his hands in defense and chuckled. Soon the whole room was in laughter and Naruto breathed a sigh of relief while he turned to Yura. Still think I'm horrible? He asked and Yura got up before giving Naruto a hug. I think you're horrible for not telling us. I'm sorry for saying that, but if you don't mind please put your shirt back on, Yura said staring at the toned muscles in front of her with a light blush along with Yuri and Naruto chuckled lightly before putting his mesh shirt and black shirt back on. Everyone, having settled down now, sat down with Yuri holding Naruto's arm like normal while they all spoke. So what do we do with Haku-san and Zabuza-san? Being revived by Naruto-san means what? Yugao asked and Naruto sighed. I have a limited control over what they do. I can force them to do stuff but their feelings will be there so I'd rather not. They'll listen to me, Naruto said and Yugao nodded. What do you say Kushina Taiko? Yugao asked and Kushina turned to them. She placed a finger to her chin and smiled. Simple, they will be our first recruits, she said and everyone wondered what she meant. Recruits? For what? Yugao asked and Kushina rubbed her hands together. It was an ingenious idea in her head and boy was it an idea. Don't worry. We'll discuss that tomorrow. Now is there any more news? Kushina asked and Naruto pointed to Yura and Yuri. Yeah, what to do with them, Naruto said making everyone turn to them, but that fell to Naruto and Kushina since they were Uzumaki and this was their home. Well we'll train them Sochi. In the ways of the Uzumaki. I've always wanted to, Kushina said and Naruto nodded while Yuri smiled with a nod. Yura bowed with a show of thanks before Yugao took out a scroll. This also came from Konoha. It's for Makoto-san, Yugao said and everyone watched as Makoto took the scroll. She unfurled it and opened it. She glanced through it all and tensed before taking it down. Tsunade requires our presence in 3 days. Something about it being a serious matter and, concerning Hizashi-san, Makoto said and everyone glanced at Naruto while the blonde narrowed his eyes. Well knowing what we know then it's likely that it's what Naruto's fearing, but what are we going to do? Sasuke asked and Kushina closed her eyes. Well I already lied for Sochi-kun and I don't mind doing it again. Makoto has done the same also, Kushina said and Yugao along with Kakashi tensed. But we'll save this for later. Right now we're all tired and we'll get some sleep. The other workers are resting so we should do the same. Everyone. Dismissed, Kushina said and everyone walked off. Zabuza and Haku went to their temporary house of dwelling while Yura and Yuri took up residence in a dormant room for them both. Sasuke and Makoto turned in along with Kakashi and Yugao. Kushina and Naruto turned out the lights while the former turned to her son. Don't worry Sochi, you're a valued member of Hinoken. You can always trust us, Kushina said and Naruto smiled with a nod as they all turned in for the night. Next morning, Lime. Kushina hummed across the sink washing dishes. It was almost time for everyone to gather and train. Kushina had set up a schedule where everyone would train with each other in ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu and kenjutsu for each other. It worked for everyone and no one complained. Currently the others were still sleeping in their rooms, well almost everyone. Naruto yawned and walked into the living room. He had never felt so refreshed from talking like last night. It felt good to get that weight off his shoulders and trust some more people. The blonde glanced at his mother humming a quiet tone over the sink and he couldn't resist the urge grin. He got a gleam in his eye as he silently walked behind her. Don't even think about it, Kushina said and Naruto pouted before he went anyway and kissed his mother on the cheek. Saw through me Datveo? Naruto asked and Kushina snickered before she flickered some water on him. Too easy, she said and Naruto quickly grabbed her into a hug. Thank you Ka-chan. I don't think they would have believed me without you, Naruto said and Kushina waved him off. It was nothing, she said ending in a surprised tone as Naruto rubbed his mother's shoulders. Kushina shuddered and the blonde smiled. Let me thank you, he said to his mother and Kushina gulped while she shook her head. And no Sochi, I have to do the dishes, she said and Naruto smirked as he moved his hand to his mother's breast and squeezed it while Kushina placed her hands over the counter. Kushina felt her legs go out while Naruto continued to rub his mother's soft mounds. And Naruto, Kushina said with a lustful shudder as Naruto kissed her neck. He trailed his tongue down her body and Kushina gulped at her son's assertiveness while Naruto pinched her nipples. Like that Ka-chan? Naruto asked and Kushina felt her throat dry. She sighed blissfully as she was reminded back to Naruto touching her in wave. It had made her so good that it was amazing. Naruto continued to trail down and lifted his mother's black Hinokin shirt, showing her lovely, flat stomach and her red-laced bra under her mesh shirt. "Ka-chan, you were waiting, weren't you?" Naruto asked, and Kushina blushed and shook her head. "Of course not," she said, and Naruto chuckled as he kissed her stomach sensually before he moved his arms around her pants and pulled them down. Kushina gasped as she was thankful that the counter was high enough to not show the scene unfolding while she tried her best to wash the dishes. "I love everything about Ka-chan," Naruto said as he rubbed her thighs, and Kushina sighed before Naruto watched her spots slightly dripping. He licked his lips and quickly attacked Kushina's honeycomb, nearly bringing Kushina to the floor. "Sochi w wait until I am finished the dishes," Kushina said, jumping from the pleasure again while Naruto smirked. "No waiting, Ka-chan," Naruto told her, and Kushina groaned and bit her lower lip to control the moans coming from her lips. Naruto smirked before he took his tongue and pushed it inside, getting all the spots of his mother while Kushina gulped and panted. Her face was flushed from the pleasure before she heard a voice. "Good morning, Kushina," Makoto said, shocking Kushina as she stared wide-eyed. Naruto heard Makoto and stopped for a second and wondered what he should do. Kushina sighed and tried her best smile. "Gee, good morning, Makoto. Breakfast will be ready soon," Kushina said with that same smile before she jumped and grabbed the counter. "Sochi, you're so cold," Kushina said as Naruto quickly moved faster with his tongue and fingers while Kushina panted. "It was some weird stuff yesterday, right?" Makoto asked, and Kushina nodded with a hesitant chuckle and a light shiver. "Why yeah, but Sochi really did a good job. He's growing up. I can't stand this," Kushina said, keeping that part to herself while Makoto snickered. "Both our boys are growing up. Just like we wanted. Say, what's wrong? Do you have a fever?" Makoto asked, and Kushina shook her head. "And no, just tired from the tea twisting and turning of the bed last night. Couldn't get much sleep," she said, and Makoto nodded her head, knowing the feeling, but for a totally different reason. "I don't see Naruto-kun," Makoto said, and Kushina moaned blissfully and silently while answering. "I'm sure he's around. He might be eating something. Why not wake up the others? I'll go get Naruto-kun just as soon as I'm done. I'll be coming soon. Very, very soon," Kushina said, and Naruto continued to lap and eat away at his mother while Makoto stood up. "Yeah, I suppose. Alright, I'll see you in a bit," Makoto said, walking off, and Kushina waved while Makoto's image vanished. Kushina grabbed her son's blonde hair and pushed him in further. "Sochi-kun," Kushina yelled as she came inside Naruto's mouth, with the blonde drinking all the sweet nectar he could take before he watched his mother slump to the floor. "Delicious, Ka-chan," Naruto told her, and Kushina huffed before she jabbed Naruto in the arm. "Don't do that again, Databane," she said, and Naruto chuckled before he quickly kissed Kushina, allowing her to taste herself in his lips, but she ignored it for the sweet kiss while Naruto parted, allowing a trail of saliva to connect them. "Couldn't resist, Ka-chan. You look so beautiful, flustered," Naruto told her, and Kushina lowly growled with a blush across her face as she got to her feet. Later, Lime End. Naruto and Kushina were standing in front of Yura and Yuri as the two were currently working on their taijutsu before Kakashi called for Naruto. "Naruto, I have to make a request," Kakashi said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow before sighing. "Great, who do you want me to revive?" Naruto asked, but Kakashi shook his head, confusing Naruto, making the blonde raise an eyebrow. "Don't revive him, but I want to see him. Obito Uchiha, please, I just want to speak with for a bit," Kakashi said, and Naruto seemed confused. "Well, I don't know, but okay," Naruto said and summoned Shin. The death god appeared before Naruto and Kakashi. "Shin, can you bring back Obito Uchiha?" "Teammate of Kakashi Hatake and Team Minato," Naruto said, and Kakashi widened his visible eye while Naruto smiled. The Shinigami closed his eyes and folded his arms. "No," he said, and Naruto widened his eyes while turning around. Even Kakashi was confused. "Why not?" Naruto asked as he wondered if there was a problem while the Shinigami spoke. "I can't bring him back because Obito Uchiha is not dead," Shin said, and the look of shock appeared on Naruto and Kakashi's face. What?" Kakashi asked, and Shin sighed at having to repeat himself. "Like I said, I can't revive what is already alive. Obito Uchiha is alive," Shin said with an extra long scowl before vanishing, and Kakashi gasped. He's alive. Obito's alive." Kakashi asked, not understanding, but he would come to understand just what Shin was saying in the near future. Chapter 20. Hinokin Training Ground. Makoto, Kushina, Naruto, Sasuke, Yugao and Kakashi were all sitting in a circle near the house as the last of the members seemed to be in deep thought. Kakashi didn't know what to believe about this. The Shinigami had just told him that Obito was alive. It couldn't be. He had seen his friend get crushed by that large boulder while they rescued Rin. It just didn't make any sense about how he survived it. He had said that half of his body had been crushed. Who walks away from that? Alright, on Tsunade's request we will all return to Konoha and see what Makoto can tell her. I'm sure she'll want answers for it, but we don't even know what Hazashi said to Tsunade, much less what he thinks, Kushina said, rubbing her soft red hair while everyone else nodded. I'll admit that I spent some time talking with Hazashi Hyuga, but I didn't think he'd reference me about it, Makoto answered back, and Naruto slumped. I'm sorry guys, but maybe it's time that I just told Ba-chan. It's like Yugao-chan said. She might make it a secret. I don't want anyone getting into trouble over what I started, Naruto said, and everyone glanced at him before Sasuke smirked. She did say that we answer to no one that one time, remember, he slightly joked, and that easily got a laugh out of some of them. Sasuke has a point, Kushina giggled along with Makoto and Naruto. Yugao merely snickered and Kakashi gave an eye smile. But I don't think that meant to keep things from her. Even this. Sochi, are you sure you can tell her? Kushina asked, and Naruto gave a very hesitant nod while everyone couldn't even imagine the pressure being put on him. Just lying to the Hokage was worthy of execution, but as Naruto claimed he couldn't die. That didn't mean that other methods couldn't be used. I'm sure Ka-chan. Come on, let's get going, Naruto said, standing to his feet and walking off. Everyone glanced at Kushina, who nodded, and they decided to get ready to go. With Naruto. The blonde could still hear the sounds of construction going on in Uzugakure, and it was beginning to take shape as it was nothing like seeing it for the first time. Naruto sighed and rubbed the back of his head. What do you think Ba-chan will do to me? Naruto asked, and Kyuubi yawned before rubbing his head. At worst she'll send you flying right back towards this island, but I doubt she'll kill you. Or even attempt to. Don't sell her short, brat. Not that I'm one to care about such things, Kyuubi said, and Naruto couldn't help but agree as he turned his head and smiled, seeing Yura teaching Yuri the basics for a Suiden jutsu. The blonde decided to pop by before leaving. Working hard you too? Naruto asked, making Yura turn to the blonde. Yuri gave a smile while wiping some sweat off her face. Of course we are, Ni-sama. I'm not gonna have Yuri slack on her training, Yura said, and Naruto chuckled with a nod while Yuri walked up to him and grabbed his hand. She gazed at it, mainly the seal, and smiled. I'm gonna work hard, Ni-san. So that you won't be sad about using that contract. We don't hate you. Right, Ne-chan? Yuri asked, and Naruto stared at Yura, who was slightly blushing while coughing lightly. At least you're using it right. I also heard from Kushina-san. You six are going back to Konoha, aren't you? Yura asked, and Naruto nodded while his smile lessened, and both girls took notice but didn't say anything. That's right. I'll be gone for a few days. Don't worry, I'll be back for you both, Naruto said, quickly wrapping his arms around Yuri in a hug, making the two widen their eyes. Yuri soon returned the hug, and Naruto smiled before turning to Yura. Room for one more? He asked, and Yura's blush deepened a little more before she huffed and turned around. You'll be back. I know that much, Baka Ni-sama, Yura muttered to herself before ordering Yuri back to her proper position for more training as Naruto walked off. The blonde sighed again before he turned to his room and quickly packed some things. He wasn't sure just how much he would need, so he opted for the standard equipment. He looked over everything he needed and closed his eyes, feeling two presences behind him. You don't have to sneak up on me. Not that you could, Naruto said while Haku and Zabuza came up behind him. The former chuckled while the latter grumbled. Don't get all high and mighty, brat. If I didn't want you to, then you wouldn't have noticed me at all. Why someone like you is my superior, I don't know, Zabuza said before Haku gently nudged her surrogate father in the stomach. I see, well, I noticed you and that's all there is to it. Nothing more, nothing less. Haku, Zabuza, while I'm gone, please watch over Yura and Yuri as well as the rest of Wave's people. Both girls need teachers, and while Yura is good, well, very good, she's still loose in some things. Can you do that? Naruto asked, and Zabuza snorted. I don't know which is the bigger insult, me taking orders from a brat or me being ordered to teach brats. Ah, yeah, we can get it done, Zabuza said while Haku snickered. I believe also Naruto-san. Leave everything to us while you go. We'll make sure to keep this place safe as well as train Yura and Yuri, Haku said, effectively making Naruto smile. Alright, thank you Haku-chan, and you too Zabuza. I'm going to go now, Naruto said, taking his clothes and walking out of the door. Haku and Zabuza glanced at each other while the former frowned. Did you notice Zabuza-sama? Haku asked, and the demon of the mist nodded his head. Yeah, something got him in a mood. He didn't look at either of us while we were talking. He must be afraid of something. Though I wouldn't know what, Zabuza said, and Haku sighed with a nod before they left as well. A little later, all the members of Hinoken appeared in front of the Uzumaki gates with Yura and Yuri waving goodbye to them. Safe travels you guys, Yuri said, and everyone nodded their heads while Yura turned to Naruto. She walked up and soon poked him in the chest, making the blonde pay attention to her. Be safe. Please, and don't do anything reckless that you don't need to, Yura said, and Naruto nodded his head with a soft smile. Everyone glanced at the two, and unknown to them all, Kushina grinned while putting a finger to her chin. So I'm not the only immoral person here, huh? Kushina snickered to herself before they all shunshined out of sight to get going towards Konoha. In a place near Konoha, Sakura, Sai and Yamato were currently sitting in the dark while going over some coordinates. It wouldn't be long before they would be able to find the location of the fire temple along with its priest. It was a recent mission given by Tsunade, but they were still quite a few days away from the spot of arrival. How much long, Yamato-sensei? Sakura asked, clearly impatient with the pace they were going at. Sai was easily doing his drawings like normal while sighing, and Yamato smiled before eating a piece of sushi for dinner. Come on Sakura, we'll be there soon. Or, should I force you to relax? Yamato asked, making his face scary with a flashlight. Sakura gulped and backed away while rubbing the back of her head. And no, that's fine. Hee damn that draconian method, she said with the last part to herself. Yamato merely smiled with a nod and leaned back while continuing to eat as Sai snickered. Well Sakura, I guess that unlike your breasts then your brain must be growing to know that you should be scared of Yamato-sensei, Sai said, and Sakura growled before huffing her annoyance of Sai and his freaking attitude. I'm totally gonna punch that asshole when I get the chance. Damn it, Sakura said to herself before going to rejoin her team under the campfire. Who knows how long it would be till they would get to the place. With Hinoken, 3 days later. Naruto and the others were currently sleeping on the ground in Hai no Kuni. It would be tomorrow that they would return to Konoha in the afternoon, but they all decided to take a break and simply not rush to have Naruto tell Tsunade and allow him the time to gather his thoughts. Naruto opened his eyes and leaned up from a tree. He later yawned and stretched his arms before getting to his feet. Naruto walked off into the woods and sighed as he came into a clearing. Naruto raised an eyebrow before noticing a lonely stump in the middle of said field. The blonde sat down and looked at the moon. He found its presence spectacular before rubbing the back of his head. Kyuubi, do you think that there is any meaning in death? Naruto asked unexpected to the fox Biju. Said Biju glared open and looked at the moon through Naruto's vision. He might have been able to read the blonde's mind, but never his feelings. That's one question that even I can't answer, brat. You're just going to have to come up with your own answer to that. It's not easy, I'll tell you that much, Kyuubi said, offering some advice that it could, while Naruto merely nodded his head and sighed before he was broken from his stupor by a touch to his shoulder. What are you doing out here, Dobi? Sasuke asked, and Naruto turned his head to the Uchiha before shaking his head. Just thinking about my meeting with Ba-chan. I wonder how she'll react to this, Naruto said, and Sasuke groaned before punching Naruto in the shoulder. You'll deal with that when you get there. Don't be so down all the time. It's not you got it? Sasuke asked, and Naruto nodded his head with a grin and a nod before taking his sword into his hands. He watched it shimmer in the moonlight before throwing it up. Sasuke watched the sword twirl while Naruto held out his hand. It cuts my arm off and Tsunade Bachan will try to execute me. It misses and Ba-chan forgives me, Naruto said while Sasuke watched the sword fall. Naruto closed his eyes and submitted to luck. The Uchiha narrowed his eyes as the sword swung around Naruto's arm, not touching it at all before it stuck to the ground. Naruto opened his eyes and smiled. Pretty stupid, Dobi. It could have cut your arm off, Sasuke said, and Naruto picked up the sword and nodded his head. Yeah, but it didn't, Datbeo, Naruto said, and Sasuke sighed with a mere nod and sat down next to Naruto. Hey Naruto, you've been going off on your own for the past few days. What have you been doing? Sasuke asked, and Naruto suddenly grinned while turning to Sasuke. Wouldn't you like to know? Naruto asked, and Sasuke narrowed his eyes at the blonde Hinokan member. Tell me or not, I don't really care. Was just curious is all, Sasuke said, and Naruto chuckled with a nod before his senses went to high alert, as did Sasuke's. The two narrowed their eyes and stood to their feet. Did you feel that, Sasuke? Naruto asked, and the Uchiha nodded his head. Before they quickly ran through the field. Naruto quickly jumped and avoided a fire kunai that exploded the stump next to them. Sasuke growled and flashed his Sharingan fast before turning his head to find someone, but it was too dark and it could have come from anywhere. Sasuke immediately took out his sword and scanned the area while Naruto did the same. Do you see anything, Sasuke? Naruto asked, keeping his guard up. The Uchiha shook his head quickly, and Naruto growled before he noticed that the presence was gone. He looked down on the ground and saw a small paper tag. Naruto narrowed his eyes before he motioned for Sasuke. The Uchiha quickly walked over to the spot and knelt down next to Naruto. What is it? Sasuke asked, and Naruto held up the paper. Barrier seal. We're somewhere, Sasuke. Next to something important, Naruto said to him, and Sasuke folded his arms while looking around. That's right. The fire temple is near here, he said, and Naruto quickly nodded his head before placing the paper now. Come on. Let's investigate. We'll go and inform Ka-chan about our findings in a bit, Naruto said, and Sasuke agreed. The two kept walking for a bit before they came up to a weird stone in the middle of the plains. Naruto and Sasuke glanced at each other before they turned their heads to see a small opening. Naruto narrowed his eyes again before he fell through the hole and jumped to the ground. Naruto, you see anything? Sasuke asked, and Naruto shook his head. Not in the least, Sasuke. Hold on, Naruto said, taking out his sword, and before long his body glowed in the white fire illuminating the hallways. Naruto smiled in relief to finally see and motioned for Sasuke to join him. So the Uchiha did. He jumped down and joined his teammate in the halls. Naruto and Sasuke traversed the entire building, looking at all the old ruins that could be seen. It seems more like a cemetery of some sort. Naruto looked around the entire room along with Sasuke. Burial tomb? Naruto asked, and Sasuke looked around as well. He could see some residual traces of chakra, but nothing more. More than likely it is, but someone was here, Sasuke said, and Naruto could honestly agree before he stopped. Sasuke did the same and turned around to see Naruto closing his eyes. He could see the blonde channeling his Honsho to his eyes before opening them. Naruto glanced to the left and right and smiled. It was just as he thought. He could see a few souls lingering around the place. One seemed to be a woman, or what he could make out of her. The blonde walked up to her while in Sasuke's eyes he was moving up to the wall. Hey, Naruto called out to the spirit, but she didn't turn around. The blonde sighed and rubbed the back of his head. Hey, he yelled, making her turn around along with the other spirits in the room. Noisy brat, isn't it? Who's he calling? One of them asked while Naruto growled. I heard that, you damn soul. You want me to give you to Shin already? Naruto asked, and immediately the souls widened their eyes. He sees us. Then that's him. That's Shinigami-sama's summoner. It's Shikan-sama, one of them said, and Naruto's sweat dropped at the name, but he didn't have the time to care about it before he told the souls to line up. They all did without complaint, since Naruto was considered a legend to all the spirits once Shin had made the announcement of his progression. They were all to treat him with the utmost respect, since the blonde was the summoner of the dead. Listen up, do any of you know what this place is? Naruto asked, and all the souls looked at each other before turning back to the blonde. It's a burial tomb, Shikan-sama. One of the 4 burial tombs of the Fire Temple. It might not concern you, but we saw a person come in here and take the corpse. Naturally we can't do anything, so we thought we should inform you, the woman said, and Naruto growled before he nodded, and while thanking the spirits he sent them back to what they were doing. Grave robbers. Naruto wondered before he motioned for Sasuke to follow him. Naruto picked up his pace and quickly entered the burial chamber. He noticed the place where the body was supposed to go, but it was gone. Sasuke, there's been a grave robbery, Naruto said, and Sasuke narrowed his eyes. How can you be so sure? He asked, and Naruto rubbed a hand through his hair. I asked the spirits around here and they said that they saw someone carrying the body away. It might be the same person who attacked us earlier. We'll have to report this to Ka-chan and Ba-chan when we return, Naruto said, and Sasuke couldn't agree more before he placed his hand on the burial stone. He quickly showed his Sharingan again and looked over it. Naruto, there are traces of Dodan elements here. This wasn't some rogue. This person knew what they were doing, Sasuke said, and Naruto growled. Well, we'll just have to stop them if we see them, then return the body. Come on Sasuke, let's. Naruto paused as he turned around to see a teenager about his age from across the hall. He wore a blue shoulder-length, dull gray, haircut with one lock over his face. He wore what appeared to be monk robes along with a tri-bladed death claw. Sasuke stared at him too, and the boy glared at them both. Die, he said, encasing his weapon in chakra. Naruto widened his eyes as he quickly pushed Sasuke out the way. Immediately the boy swung his weapon forward and Naruto was slammed into the wall by a gale of wind. Fuden chakra, Naruto wondered before he dropped to the ground. He growled lowly while Sasuke took out his sword and pointed it at the stranger. You just made a big mistake. One you won't live to regret, Sasuke said, and before he got another smirk as the stranger's arm lit up with Fuden chakra. Take this. Jua Sho, beast wave palm, he yelled, making Naruto and Sasuke widen their eyes before they were both blasted out of the ceiling and into the air. The two Hinoken members backflipped while the monk-looking boy jumped into the air. Naruto growled and quickly grabbed his sword also. Fuden. Daitapa, Naruto yelled, sending the heavy wind gust towards the stranger, knocking them into the plains. Naruto grinned like before, grabbed Sasuke's arm. He twirled the Uchiha around before he sent him spinning into the air. Sasuke did his hand signs while he continued to spin and shouted. Kaden. Nagale no Jutsu, fire release. Streaming line technique, Sasuke said, and the fires wrapped around his body before they were sent towards the stranger. The boy got up and backflipped away from the strike before he snickered. Naruto and Sasuke raised their eyebrows while he gazed at them. Repent. I'll give you 3 seconds, he said, grinning while Naruto and Sasuke glanced at each other. They narrowed their eyes before he sighed. Time's up. Now you die. Jua Sho, he yelled, sending more wind blades towards Naruto and Sasuke. The Uchiha and Uzumaki duo glanced at each other again and nodded while Naruto took a breath of air and swirled his sword around. Uzu no Fukushu. Henkakei's no Jutsu, whirlpool revenge. Winds of change technique, the blonde hollered, and immediately the winds of the plains picked up before him and the blonde sent them all rushing while Sasuke finished his own. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, Sasuke shouted and sent a blazing fire into the winds, bringing a large fire over the field before it exploded. Sasuke and Naruto covered their eyes from the explosion and sighed. Why would a grave robber stay behind? Naruto asked, and Sasuke snorted. Cause he's too damn arrogant, but we remedied that, Sasuke said, and Naruto nodded his head before they heard another noise. Naruto narrowed his eyes before they saw the stranger appear. Not bad, but this is where it ends, he said, and Naruto chuckled with a nod. Yeah, for you, he said, making the stranger raise an eyebrow before he heard swirling. He looked to his left to see two Narutos holding a large Rasengan as they charged him down. Udama Rasengan, they both yelled before the boy used his blade claw and took a defensive pose. The two Narutos ran at him before the wind swirled around and slammed them while Naruto and Sasuke widened their eyes. Jua Reppu Sho, beast tearing gale palm, he yelled, and the two clones of Naruto gasped before they were sent flying from a large explosion, making them dispel. Wow, he's tough, Naruto said, and Sasuke couldn't help but agree before the boy raised his other arm. Naruto could feel the demonic power from it before there was a yell. Sora, stop, someone yelled. Naruto and Sasuke turned their heads and noticed monks along with Sakura and two people Naruto didn't know coming up close. The blonde and brunette duo withdrew their swords before Sakura widened her eyes. Sasuke-kun, Naruto, she yelled, waving to them both. The Uzumaki raised an eyebrow along with the Uchiha. Both sighed and rubbed the back of their heads, and everyone closed in on the situation. The older monk looked at Sora, who rubbed the back of his head and scratched his cheek. Chiraku-sama, you were right to be worried. The barrier was broken, the tomb was open, and I went to investigate. I found these two inside, Sora said, making Naruto and Sasuke fold their arms. Naruto would have retorted, but he tried to maintain an air of professionalism. We wandered into the field. We felt a presence attack us and took our action. We investigated the tomb as well. We thought he was the robber, Naruto said, and Chiraku nodded his head. You don't bear the Konoha headband, he said cautiously, and Naruto narrowed his eyes along with Sasuke. The two were about to say something before someone spoke. Heavy accusation, Chiriku. Especially to my son, Kushina said. With her, Makoto, Yugao and Kakashi dropped to the ground. Sora wondered who some of these people were while Chiriku widened his eyes. He gulped before he walked forward. Kushina-sama. Chiriku said, making Yamato, Sakura and Sai confused. Naruto grinned as he turned around. Ka-chan, how did you find us? Naruto asked, and Makoto chuckled. With the loud explosions and that massive fire that we saw, it was easy. Next time stay with the group, Makoto said, and Chiriku turned to Makoto as well. Makoto-sama also? He asked while the two ladies smiled to their friend. Yeah, they knew about Chiriku from when he was a lot younger. That aspiring monk that always trained hard. Nice to see you, Chiriku. Now then, what's the accusation against my son? Kushina asked, and Chiriku widened his eyes as he turned to Naruto. The blonde raised an eyebrow before gulping. Sora suspected him and the younger Uchiha of grave robbery. It's something very serious that's been happening to the Fire Temple, Chiriku said while Kushina narrowed her eyes. I see. Well, it sounds very serious, doesn't it? She asked, and Chiriku nodded his head while Yamato coughed. Kushina-san, might I ask what you're doing out here? Yamato asked while Kushina and Kakashi glanced at them. Sorry, Yamato-san, but I'm not gonna answer that right now. Chiriku, mind taking us to the Fire Temple? Kushina asked, and Chiriku immediately nodded, allowing Hinoken to follow after him along with the Konoha shinobi. Chiriku-sama. One of the monks yelled, making everyone stop. He turned to them and they reported the news. Katane-sama's corpse is gone. Without a doubt. We have no idea where it could have gone, the monks said, and Chiriku narrowed his eyes before lightly cursing. We must protect the other three. Make preparations immediately while I take them back to the Fire Temple, Chiriku said, and the other two nodded before moving while Sora and the elder monk guided the others to the Fire Temple. Hino Kuni's Fire Temple. Naruto and the others took a long flight of stairs, but made it towards the top while Naruto and Sasuke stared in slight awe. They had never been to the Fire Temple before, but it seemed too amazing. Kushina-sama, Makoto-sama, please head into the meeting room. I'll join you slowly, Chiriku said, and everyone nodded as they walked away. Naruto turned his eyes to see some of the elders talking with Chiriku, but before long he noticed them all glaring. He narrowed his eyes and watched them gaze hard at Sora. The blonde growled and balled his fists. He slowly stopped while others went ahead. He walked up to them as Sora walked off in a bad mood. Hey, he said to them, and everyone turned to the blonde to see the coldness of them, like they could only hope for death, but won't get it. Staring at someone is rude, Naruto told them all and looked at Sora before walking off. Unknown to him, Sora heard those words and widened his eyes before turning back to Naruto, who was already gone. Meeting room. Naruto opened the sliding door and noticed everyone sitting around. Sasuke was between his mother and Sakura while Yugao, Kakashi and Yamato were sitting together. Sai was somewhat next to Kushina with an open spot next to her. Naruto, where have you been? Take your seat, Sakura said in an almost annoyed tone while Naruto glanced at her. He wouldn't normally care about what she was saying, but he saw Kushina motioning for him to hurry, so the blonde did and sat next to her. He closed his eyes and folded his arms. Ka-chan, where do you know this Chiriku guy from? Naruto asked, and Kushina turned to Makoto. It seemed that everyone wanted to know as well, so Kushina decided to indulge them a little. I know him because when he was younger he came to Konoha. It was around the time that Minato had just started being the Hokage. I trained him only slightly in some techniques that he asked me to show him. It was always, when I grow up I'll become a great monk. Makoto, you trained him too, right? Kushina asked, and Makoto rubbed the back of her head. A bit, I guess. He wanted help so I gave it to him, Makoto said while Sakura gasped. Naruto, Sasuke-kun, your mothers know some amazing people, Sakura said, and the two sons shrugged their shoulders at her words, not really caring either way. Soon the door opened and Chiriku came through and sat down on the mat. He coughed and straightened up. While I'd like to reminisce, I still have to give information. I'm glad that Konoha was able to respond to our request so quickly. I must tell you that this is very dangerous. They have taken the corpse of Katane-sama as we were told. He, along with the other tombs to the south, west and north, lie Sato, Nama, and Tuu. They were a part of the organization the 12 Ninja Guardians, Chiriku said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes at the name. I remember that name. You guys are an organization that protects the feudal lord of Hai no Kuni. It would be a job for Konoha, but since we protect the whole country and not just the feudal lord, then we leave it to you guys. Ka-chan, remember when you told me that you were invited to join? Naruto asked, making Sakura, Sai and Yamato widen their eyes. Kakashi and Yugao raised their eyebrows while Makoto chuckled. That's right, Sochi. I was invited to join thanks to my skills and expertise. Even Makoto was invited to join, Kushina said, and everyone turned to Makoto, who was blushing and rubbing the back of her head slightly. Really, Ka-san? Sasuke asked, as he hadn't known about this before, but Makoto nonetheless nodded her head that she was in fact once invited to be a part of the organization. But we refused, Kushina said, and soon the looks of admiration were changed to confusion as people wondered why. The 12 Ninja Guardians were a famous platoon of people. Who wouldn't want to join? Why not? Sakura asked, and Chiriku sighed and looked at the ground while Kushina spoke. Because at the time, the nations were at war and all forces had to be expended. There was never a good opportunity. So we just refused it, Kushina said, making everyone nod. Kakashi knew that they had been at war, and, while Yugao was young, she knew about it as well when she was a genin. A trying time that I'm sure it was, Kushina-sama, but still I must imagine that whoever stole the bodies must be planning something, Chiriku said, and Yamato turned around. That's right. Asuma might know. He was also a member of the 12 Ninja Guardians, Yamato said, and everyone glanced at each other and whispered before Chiriku chuckled. Asuma, huh? Has he been well? He asked, and Yamato nodded his head while Chiriku spoke. That's right, Asuma was among us. It was early in our life and we were young. A coup d'etat was planned against Fire Country. No one cared for peace by having individual nations. They only wanted peace under the nation of Konoha, Chiriku said, and Sakura snorted. Selfish much? She asked before people shushed her, making the pink-haired Kunoichi blush in embarrassment. Asuma-san, myself, Tuu, Nama, Sato and Katane all fought the traitors and we won, but we lost those 4. Asuma and myself are all that's left of that generation, Chiriku said, and Naruto growled. Stealing corpses and trying to revive the dead with their own power. Insolence, Naruto jumping to his feet, surprising people. The members of Hinoken saddened at Naruto's look. The look of a personal summon being disrespected. It just wouldn't stand at all for the blonde. Naruto, sit down. Sakura shouted before she flinched from Naruto's glare. He opened the sliding door and immediately closed it while Kushina followed him soon after. Please continue. I'll relay the message to Kushina and Naruto, Kakashi said, and Chiriku nodded. With Naruto. The blonde was currently walking through the Temple of Fire and sighed again. People reviving the dead without consequence or payment. It just didn't feel right to the blonde. Shin was the god of death. Stealing from him was just plain sick. I'll find who did this and I'll make them pay, Shin, Naruto said before looking to the left and noticed people sparing. He quickly glanced at Sora, watched him go through his katas. He raised an eyebrow and watched as Sora had a match with one of the younger monks. If you could even call it that. This guy was no match for Sora, and while he got a few lucky hits, Naruto could tell that Sora was taking it easy. Well, I don't have the time to deal with this or that crazy guy. I'll just do something about him later, Naruto thought to himself before he felt a pat on his shoulder. What's the matter, Sochi? You seem upset, Kushina said, and Naruto looked up at the moon in all its glory. Ka-chan, those who take from Shin should know better. He's my summon. I can only imagine how he feels when people think they can revive someone like that. It's just not right to me. I'm sorry if I stormed out, Naruto said, and Kushina waved him off. It's all right. Besides, it seems that we're about to be informed soon, she said, turning around. So what's the strategy? Yamato asked, and Kushina shook her head. You guys have to strategize. We have to go back to Konoha by tomorrow. Sorry, but we'll be back in a bit, I'm sure. Perhaps tomorrow night for a plan, but right now our orders are important as well, Kushina said, and everyone nodded their heads. Very well. Sakura, Sai, come on and we'll talk, Yamato said while they nodded and walked off. Chiriku, you take care. I'm sure we'll meet up with each other later, Kushina said, and Chiriku nodded before the Hinoken members turned to leave. It would be a long day, but they would finally reach Konoha and tell Tsunade some news while they were at it. Back in Uzushiogakure. Yura and Yuri were currently studying a scroll on Sweden techniques from Zabuza and Haku, who were calmly watching the two practice. Naturally they would spare with the sisters also. Yura would take Zabuza and Yuri would take Haku. Something about being fair to the gender. Alright brats. Take a break, Zabuza said, walking off while Yura huffed and rubbed a hand through her soft red hair. She sighed and leaned against a tree. That guy is brutal. I swear he's out to get me, Yura said, and Yuri chuckled while laying up also. He's not so bad, Ne-chan. I think he's just following Nissan's orders. Speaking of Nissan, why do you blush when you see him? Yuri asked and Yura snorted. I don't. He's our family. We can't do anything, Yura said, and Yuri pouted. Ne-chan, you need to be honest. Nissan's cute. When he exposed his body to us I thought he was magnificent, Yuri said while Haku chuckled. No more manga for you, Yura said, and Yuri visibly shook. Yuri without manga was Naruto without ramen. It just wouldn't work. I bet if you got with Nissan then he'd make you happy, Ne-chan. Don't you think? Yuri asked and Yura merely turned over and huffed. Just rest, Yuri. We'll talk about this later, Yura said, and Yuri silently chuckled with a nod of her head. Ne-chan and Nissan sitting in a tree. Kissin, Yuri's sweat dropped when Yura stretched her shoulders and smiled forcefully. Our rest felt good. Ne Yuri, let's have a spar. Right now, Yura shouted as she chased Yuri around the compound, making Haku laugh at them both and their antics before she did wonder what the others were doing since she hadn't seen them for a few days. With Hinoken, Hokage Mansion. Tsunade was currently doing her paperwork like normal. The mission report from Yamato about arriving to the Fire Temple proved to be a great success. She didn't know how well this would turn out, but she could at least be happy with everything. That was until Naruto and the others dropped from the ceiling. All present and accounted for, Hokage-sama, Kushina said, dropping down along with everyone else. They all smiled and waved and Tsunade nodded. Very good, all of you. Now then, Makoto, I would like to know the details of this mission that Sarutobi-sensei had you going on, right? Ba-chan, Naruto interrupted, bringing everyone to him. Tsunade glanced at him and the blonde looked at the ground. They all looked at him and Tsunade sighed. What is it, Naruto? Tsunade asked rather impatiently, but she could deal if it was Naruto. So the young blonde walked up and while Makoto put her hand on his shoulder, Naruto shook his head and took it off. He didn't want to lie anymore. Not to Tsunade, not for this. Ba-chan, please, we need to talk. This is top secret and on my life, please listen to me, Naruto said, and Tsunade narrowed her eyes. She leaned back into her chair and nodded. Naruto sighed and gulped. I would also like it if the Anbu weren't present. I want no one present. Just you and me, Naruto said, and Tsunade raised an eyebrow to Naruto's request. The blonde's eyes seemed to be pleading with her on it and Tsunade bit her lip. She had never seen Naruto so anxious before, but sighed. Naruto, how serious is this? Tsunade asked and Naruto felt like his world could be crashing down at the moment. Kyuubi class secret, Naruto said, and Tsunade narrowed her eyes dangerously at the blonde, but Naruto glared right back and Tsunade sighed. Then Naruto, I can't take them out. You know how crucial the Anbu are. Just tell me, Tsunade said, and Naruto bit his lip. He was really going to curse, but didn't and sighed. I'm so gonna regret this, Naruto said to himself before nodding. Alright then, Ba-chan. Guys, can you leave? Naruto asked and everyone filed out the room, giving Naruto and Tsunade their privacy. Even the Anbu in the room were wondering what the blonde would have to say while Naruto bowed and kept his head low to the ground. Ba-chan, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, Datbeo, Naruto said, and Tsunade narrowed her eyes. What are you sorry for? She asked and Naruto leaned up. He took off his black shin guard and gulped. I'm sorry because I lied to you. I lied about everything that had to do with this seal, Naruto said, and Tsunade looked at it. The Anbu in the room tensed at those words. Lying was death by law, or at least by Hokage's orders. It might even be imprisonment. Tsunade glanced at it and pounded the desk. What do you mean you lied? She asked, visibly angry. Naruto nodded and began. I lied about Ka-chan coming back. I asked Makoto-chan to lie also. I asked Hiyashi Hyuga, Hanako Hyuga and Hisashi Hyuga to keep quiet. I also have the reason why Sasuke came back willingly. Everything that I've done was a lie to you, Naruto said, and Tsunade stood to her feet. She wanted to be angry, but the look of pressure on Naruto's face as well as his contemplative look made her settle down.